Have you ever truly known the person sleeping next to you? That was the fleeting, terrifying thought that exploded in Amelia's mind the instant the floorboard creaked. It wasn't the familiar, comforting groan of their old house settling. This was a deliberate, weighty sound. A presence. Her eyes snapped open into the oppressive darkness, her breath catching in her throat. The digital clock glowed 3:03 a.m. David's side of the bed was empty. The cold sheets confirmed he had been gone for a while. Another creak, closer this time, from the hallway just outside their bedroom door. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure fear. This was wrong. David was a deep sleeper, a man who wouldn't get up for anything less than a fire. She strained her ears, listening for any other sound over the deafening silence. The house felt different, charged with a strange, waiting energy. She slowly, silently, pushed the duvet back, her muscles tense. The wooden floor was icy under her bare feet as she crept towards the bedroom door. Her hand trembled as she reached for the cold brass doorknob. Turning the knob with infinite slowness, she opened the door just a crack, enough to peer into the shadow-drenched hallway. A faint flickering orange light danced from the far end, from the doorway that led down to the basement. The basement David always kept locked. The basement he called his man cave, a place she was never, ever allowed to enter. He'd always said it with a joking smile, but his eyes held a firm, unyielding warning. Now that locked door was wide open, casting long, sinister shadows that seemed to reach for her. A low, rhythmic chanting drifted up the stairs, a guttural, unfamiliar language that made the fine hairs on her arms stand up. It was David's voice, but twisted into something ancient and cold. This was not her funny, loving husband who made her pancakes every Sunday. This was a stranger performing a secret ritual in the dead of night. Her curiosity, a wild, reckless thing, overpowered her fear. She had to see. She had to know. She inched out into the hallway, each step a calculated risk, moving toward the terrifying, unknown truth. The stairs down to the basement were steep and narrow, old wood that she knew could betray her with a single squeak. She descended like a ghost, pressing herself against the cold wall, her gaze fixed on the growing scene below. The air thickened with the smell of something earthy and metallic, like wet soil and old pennies. The flickering light came from dozens of black candles arranged in an intricate pattern on the concrete floor, and in the center of that pattern stood David, his back to her, shirtless and gleaming with sweat. He was painting symbols on the wall with a thick, dark liquid that dripped from a small bowl he held. The symbols seemed to pulse in the candlelight, alive with a dark energy. Amelia's stomach lurched. Was that blood? The chanting grew louder, more intense, a desperate plea or a powerful command to something unseen. She watched, paralyzed, as he raised his arms, his voice reaching a fever pitch. Then suddenly, he fell silent. The candles flared violently for a second. And in that instant, Amelia knew, with a chilling certainty, that she was not alone in watching. A profound coldness swept through the basement, extinguishing several candles, plunging parts of the room into deeper shadow. David lowered his arms, his shoulders slumping in exhaustion or relief. He began to turn, as if to ascend the stairs. Amelia's survival instinct screamed at her to move. She scrambled back up the stairs, her heart pounding in her ears, desperate to reach the bedroom before he saw her. She flew across the hallway, slipped through the door and leaped into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin just as his footfall hit the bottom step. She squeezed her eyes shut, forcing her breathing to slow into a deep, rhythmic pattern, feigning sleep. The bedroom door opened. David's presence filled the doorway, and she could feel his eyes on her. The smell from the basement, candle smoke, earth, and that coppery tang wafted into the room. He stood there for an eternity, just watching her. She focused every ounce of her will on keeping her body relaxed, her face peaceful. Finally, he moved. She heard the soft rustle of clothes being removed, the bed dipping under his weight. He slid in beside her, his body radiating an unnatural coldness that seeped through the sheets. He didn't try to cuddle her, as he usually would. He just lay on his back, staring at the ceiling. Amelia kept up her act, her mind racing 1,000,000 miles a minute. Ritualist. The word echoed in her skull. Her David, the man who cried at sad movies and rescued spiders from the bathtub, was involved in something dark and occult. The contradiction was so vast it threatened to break her understanding of reality itself. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting the room in cheerful, normal hues. The smell of coffee and bacon wafted up from the kitchen. Amelia woke up, for a moment believing it had all been a horrific nightmare. Then she saw the faint, dark smudge on the wooden floor near the door. It looked like dried mud or something else. The memory of last night crashed down on her, cold and hard. She descended the stairs to find David flipping pancakes, humming a tune. He looked over his shoulder and smiled, his eyes warm and loving.
"Morning, sleepyhead,"
he said, his voice full of its usual affection. "I made your favorite." He looked exactly like her husband. He acted exactly like her husband. But the image of him in the candlelight, chanting those unknown words, was burned onto her retinas. She forced a smile, her lips feeling like rubber. "Smells amazing," she managed to say, her voice thankfully steady. She studied him as he moved around their sunny kitchen, looking for a crack in the facade, a hint of the man from the basement. There was nothing. He placed a stack of pancakes in front of her, kissed her forehead, and told her she looked beautiful. The normalcy was more terrifying than the ritual itself. How could he be both things? The loving husband and the secret practitioner of dark arts? The stakes were no longer just about a discovered secret. They were about her sanity, her safety, and the very foundation of her 7-year marriage. She had to investigate. She had to get into that basement. The first chance she got, when David left for his Saturday golf game, she sprang into action. The basement door was, predictably, locked again. But this time, she was prepared. Years ago, David had given her a spare key for emergencies, joking that she'd never need it. She'd hung it on a hook in the laundry room, forgotten until now. Her hands shook as she fit the key into the lock. It turned with a heavy, satisfying clunk. She pushed the door open, the familiar smell of dust and dampness washing over her. Now forever tainted by the memory of last night's sinister aroma. The stairs groaned under her weight as she descended into the gloom. She flipped the light switch, a single bare bulb illuminating the space. It looked utterly ordinary. Storage boxes, old furniture, David's workout bench. There was no circle of candles, no bloody symbols on the wall. She walked to the spot where she had seen him standing. The concrete floor was clean. She knelt, running her fingers over the smooth, cold surface. Nothing. Had she dreamed it? A desperate hope flared in her chest. Maybe it was a night terror, a trick of the mind. But then her fingers found it. A tiny, almost imperceptible crack in the concrete floor, outlining a perfect square, a hidden trapdoor. Her hope vanished, replaced by a cold dread. This was real. She searched for a way to open it, running her hands along the edges. In one corner, her nail caught on a small, recessed latch. She pried it up, and the heavy square of concrete lifted with a grind, revealing a dark space beneath and a set of even steeper, older stone steps leading down into the earth. A wave of cold, stale air rose from the opening, carrying that unmistakable scent, earth, metal, and something else, something sweetly rotten. This was the real basement, the one he truly hid. Every cell in her body told her not to go down there. But the need to know, to understand the man she married, was too powerful. She found a flashlight on a shelf, clicked it on, and began her descent into her husband's deepest secret. The stone steps were worn smooth with age, descending far deeper than their house's foundation should allow. The beam of her flashlight cut through the absolute blackness, illuminating a small circular chamber. The walls were not concrete, but rough, ancient-looking stone, like a crypt. And on these walls, the symbols were not painted but carved deep into the rock, stained a permanent, dark brown. In the center of the room was a stone altar. It was clean now, but dark stains were seeped into its porous surface. This was not a new hobby. This was old, established. This was a place of serious, repeated dark ritual. The scale of the deception took her breath away. Her light swept across the altar and landed on a small wooden box sitting atop it. It was ornately carved with the same symbols that covered the walls. With a trembling hand, she lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a piece of black velvet, was a locket. Her locket, the one she had lost over a year ago, the one her grandmother had given her, that she swore never took off. David had helped her search the entire house for weeks. He had comforted her when she cried. All the while it was down here. Why? What dark purpose did it serve? She picked up the locket, its metal cold against her skin. As she held it, a jolt, like a static shock, but colder, sharper, shot up her arm. A cascade of images flooded her mind. Not memories, but sensations. A terrifying feeling of falling, the screech of tires, a blinding impact, then nothing. A vast, empty nothing. She dropped the locket as if it had burned her. Stumbling back from the altar, she knew that feeling. That was the feeling from the car accident she had over a year ago. The one she shouldn't have survived. The doctors had called her recovery a miracle. She had walked away from a total wreck, with barely a scratch. David had never left her side. His devotion palpable, his fear for her real. Or so she had thought. Now a horrifying new narrative was stitching itself together in her mind. The accident, the lost locket, his secret rituals, her impossible survival. Was it a miracle? Or was it something else? Something he had done? Something he had bargained for? The love she felt for him now warred with a primeval, terrifying fear. What was the price? She heard the distant sound of the garage door opening. David was home early. Panic seized her. She scrambled up the stone steps, her heart trying to burst out of her chest. She lowered the heavy concrete trapdoor back into place, ensuring the latch was secure. She flew up the wooden stairs, locked the basement door behind her, and rushed to the laundry room to return the key to its hook. She just made it to the sink, pretending to wash a cup, when the kitchen door opened and David walked in, his golf bag slung over his shoulder. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his smile easy. "The game got rained out." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and nuzzling her neck. She froze, every muscle rigid. The image of the altar, the carved symbols, the cold locket flashed before her eyes. This man holding her had been in that chamber. His hands had performed unspeakable acts on that stone. She forced herself to relax into his embrace, to turn and smile at him. "That's a shame," she heard herself say, her voice strangely calm. "I missed you." His eyes searched her face for a fraction of a second too long. Did he sense her fear? Could he smell the dank air of his secret chamber on her clothes? He kissed her forehead. "I'll just put my clubs away," he said, his tone light. He turned and walked toward the basement door. Amelia's blood ran cold. Would he notice a slight misalignment of the trapdoor? A trace of her footprint in the dust? She held her breath, listening. She heard the key turn in the lock, the door open and close. He was down there. She waited, paralyzed, for the shout of discovery, for the sound of his furious footsteps charging back up the stairs. 5 minutes passed. 10. The silence was deafening. Finally, she heard the basement door open and close again, and his footsteps moved down the hall toward his study. He hadn't found out. Not yet. But the narrow escape made the danger feel more real, more immediate. She was living with a powerful stranger, and she had just trespassed into his most sacred, terrifying space. The stakes were now life and death. She had to be smarter. She had to be perfect. Life became a high-wire act of performed normalcy. She was the loving wife, cooking his meals, laughing at his jokes, sharing his bed. But underneath, her mind was a whirlwind of terror and investigation. She started noticing small things she had overlooked before. The small, sharp knife he used for gardening was always impeccably clean. He received strange, heavy packages in the mail never opened in front of her. He would sometimes leave the house late at night, telling her he was going for a drive to clear his head. She never asked where he went. She began to research, using a private browser on her laptop, searching for the symbols she had seen carved into the wall. Her searches led her into a dark online underworld of occult forums and ancient texts. The symbols were associated with old forbidden magic, specifically necromancy and life force manipulation. Rituals meant to cheat death, to bind a soul, to trade one life for another. The pieces of the puzzle were forming a picture so horrifying she could barely comprehend it. Her survival had a source, and it was monstrous. One night she pretended to be fast asleep as he slid out of bed. She listened to him dress quietly and leave the room. This was her chance. As soon as she heard the car pull out of the driveway, she went to his study, a room she usually respected as his private space. The lock on his desk drawer was simple. A few tries with a hairpin, and it clicked open. Inside were not bills or documents, but a thick, leather-bound journal, its pages filled with David's familiar handwriting. This was it. The truth. She opened the journal, her eyes scanning the pages. It was a log of rituals, dates, and ingredients. And then she found an entry, dated the night of her accident. The words made her blood freeze. The offering is prepared. The vessel is ready. Her life for Amelia's. The balance must be maintained. May the forces forgive this transgression. Her love is worth any price. A vessel? An offering? Her hands trembling violently, she turned the page. There was a newspaper clipping folded inside. A story about a missing person. A young woman vanished without a trace the night Amelia lived. The moral collapse was absolute. The loving man she knew was a carefully constructed mask. His devotion was a possessive, terrifying force that had transgressed the natural order. He hadn't just saved her, he had condemned another to die in her place. His love was a perversion, a crime against life itself. The weight of this knowledge was a physical pressure on her chest. She was living a life paid for with murder. Every kiss, every touch was tainted by this horrific, hidden truth. She felt a scream building in her throat, a primal need to flee this beautiful, cursed house. She heard the car returning. She quickly reassembled the drawer, hiding the journal exactly as she found it, and fled to the bedroom. She lay in the dark, listening to him come inside, his footsteps heavy. He didn't come upstairs immediately. She heard him in his study. Was he checking his journal? Did he know? Minutes later, he entered the bedroom. He didn't get into bed. He stood over her, watching. The silence stretched, taut and deadly. She could feel his gaze like a physical weight. He knew something was wrong. The game was up. "Amelia," he said, his voice soft, but devoid of its usual warmth. It was the voice from the basement, the ritualist's voice. "Are you awake?" She didn't move, didn't breathe, She kept her eyes closed, her body still. She could smell the night air on him. And something else. The faint, iron scent of blood. He leaned closer, his breath ghosting over her cheek. "I can always tell," he whispered, almost sadly. "Your heart is beating so fast, my love. Like a little bird caught in a trap. What did you see?" Her eyes flew open. There was no point in pretending anymore. The truth hung between them in the dark room. She saw the pain in his eyes, a deep, abyssal sorrow, but also a frightening resolve. "You killed someone," she whispered, the words tearing from her throat. "For me." He didn't deny it. He simply nodded, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. "I couldn't lose you," he said, his voice breaking. "Don't you understand? I would burn the whole world to keep you safe. You are everything." His confession, wrapped in a declaration of love, was the most terrifying thing she had ever heard. This wasn't just a monster. It was a broken man who loved her, with a love so twisted it had become a thing of evil. She scrambled out of bed, backing away from him, toward the door. "Stay away from me," she hissed. He took a step forward, his hand outstretched, not in threat, but in pleading. "Amelia, please." "It's done. It's over. We can be happy. We can forget." But she could never forget. The blood was an ocean between them. She turned and ran, bolting down the stairs and toward the front door. He was faster, stronger. He caught her arm just as her hand touched the doorknob, spinning her around to face him. His grip was like iron. "Let me go," she screamed, struggling against him. "I have to. The balance," he said, his eyes wild with a frantic energy. "The ritual binds us. Your life is tied to the pact. If you leave, if you break the connection, the energy will unravel. You could die. Please, you have to trust me." Was this another lie? A final, desperate manipulation to keep his possessed prize? Or was it the terrifying truth of the dark magic he had wielded? She didn't know. All she knew was that she had to get out. She brought her knee up hard, catching him off guard. He grunted in pain, his grip loosening for a split second. It was all she needed. She wrenched free, yanked the door open, and fled into the cold night, running barefoot down the driveway without looking back. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to escape. She ran until her lungs burned and her feet were cut and bruised. She hid behind a large oak tree at the edge of a neighbor's property, gasping for air, listening for pursuit. The night was silent. He hadn't followed her, or he was waiting. She was alone, terrified, and trapped in a nightmare, where her savior was her jailer, and his love was a death sentence. The life she thought was a miracle was a beautiful cage built on a foundation of sin. She had to find a way out, not just from him, but from the dark pact itself. The lesson here is a harrowing one, that love, when twisted by obsession and a desire to control fate, can become a destructive and monstrous force. True love respects the natural order and the autonomy of the other person. It does not commit atrocities in their name. Amelia's story shows us that the greatest horrors can be hidden behind the most familiar faces, and that the price of a life unnaturally extended can be a soul permanently scarred. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed, and some truths change everything forever. Thank you for joining us in the Story Palace. This was a tale of love's darkest paradox. If this story held you captive, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Ring the bell so you don't miss our next journey into the shadows. Remember, every like writes a new story. Until next time, sleep well.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Anxiety, filling up every space, no privacy. And silently, it could build and build until you finally see.